Museum. And also in Montevideo, Eloisa Capurro is a journalist for Busqueda. That's a weekly newspaper. She's been covering Uruguay's marijuana legislation. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Let's start here on my laptop with a headline. This is via the Washington Post. Not too long ago, Uruguay setting up new pot shops after challenge by banks. And I'll scroll down here so you can see the picture of that cannabis. Hannah, help us understand why banks headquartered in the U.S. might have a say in Uruguay's legalization program.
So the issue is that though 8 states in the United States have legalized marijuana on a state level, it's still illegal federally. And so we've been operating in a sort of gray area as it regards to financial transactions with marijuana-related businesses. It's still not legal for banks to do business with marijuana companies, but under Obama, the Department of Justice and the Department of Treasury issued some guidelines under which banks could, sort of in good faith, do business with marijuana companies. And so it's still federally illegal, but they promised they wouldn't prosecute or enforce federal law if they adhere to these guidelines. Nowadays with Uruguay, though it has legalized it on a national level, in order to participate in the international financial market, they have to do business with United States banks. And big banks in the US like Bank of America are worried about doing those kind of transactions with Uruguayan banks because it's still federally illegal. So it's really a shame, and it's a massive issue and problem that our scheduling on the federal level is creating this hindrance for the implementation of a law that has been nationally decided by a sovereign country.
So we're seeing a lot of criticism online about the decision for U.S. banks and U.S. policies not to do business with Uruguayan pharmacies that dispense marijuana. Raquel, I want to read you this tweet we got from Compa. Take a look. She says, "What the U.S. is doing in Uruguay is horrible. They are actually meddling in internal policies." Raquel, do you agree that this is an issue of national sovereignty for Uruguay?
Absolutely. And I think United States should think about this. You are interfering with the development of our process. And this is, and understand that your country may decide not to legalize it. But there should be a limit, a border, where you decide, where the authorities, the government should say, this is our border. We cannot interfere with other democracies. And this way they are interfering. Because we know that United States is also selling and doing a lot of money, making a lot of money from cannabis. And this is your problem. But our problem is not only a business policy. This is a security, human rights, and public health policy. And this way, you are interfering. So I think that democracies should be respected. And perhaps the government, the authorities, should start thinking a way of where banks could do business, can go on making business with our country, even you haven't legalized. That is for you, not for us. Because even there's no... it's not the money from you. You are interfering with that.
Right.
So, and I think that and there is another issue. You know, many countries, many states in the United States are selling cannabis and also working with banks, legal banks. But so Raquel, where that money is coming, is going after that. Because I think that amounts $1,000 million should be going anywhere, somewhere. So what's going on with that? What you are looking at us and not your own business.
Raquel, I hear you. Eloisa, I see you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
I wanted to jump in the conversation just to, bring a framework of how the financial system works here in Uruguay. We don't have, as you have in the United States, regional banks or local banks. All of our banks, except of Banco República, with the exception of Banco República, which is a state-owned bank, all of our banks are private banks, so they operate in the international financial system. And another thing you have to understand is how heavily dollarized is the Uruguayan economy. not only because most of our savings are in US dollars, but also we have, when you go to buy a microwave, it's going to be labeled in US dollars as well. So private banks are really, forced into this situation where they cannot operate with enterprises connected to marijuana, because all of these correspondents are going to stop working with them. So it's really a problematic issue here.
So I hear what you're saying. I want us to take a look at my laptop right here. This is the Museum of Cannabis out of Montevideo. Eduardo, this is the museum that you helped found. Take a tab over here. This is on Facebook, and these are just a few pictures of what that museum looks like. Opened in December 2016. Eduardo, you're the director of this museum, but you're also one of two firms that are allowed to grow cannabis via the government legally. So how has this policy, or how has this new announcement that these banks will not do business with banks in Uruguay, how has that affected you?
Well, there has no effect to me. The museum is just a museum, so it's not related with selling cannabis. The museum does not sell cannabis, so I think that United States law makes a differentiation between those who touch the plant, let's say, to those that are related with cannabis but not touching directly the plant. And in the case of the museum, we really have no problem with the law, and it's like any museum in Uruguay. It's not a business related with selling cannabis. And I think that both projects that are selling wholesale flowers to pharmacies, both didn't have any kind of problem. The problem is with only retailers. And I think that is a transitional situation. I mean, I think that legalization and regulation, as you showed in the map, is moving fast all around democracies. And sooner or later, the financial system will be aware of this situation and will change itself. So I think that Uruguay is not only changing everything because of being the first country to legalize cannabis to their public, but I think that Uruguay probably will be changing the world, because in 6 months or in 1 year, the financial system will be normalizing this situation. Canada is coming, Israel is coming, and more states in the United States are coming, and more democracies in all over the world will be selling cannabis. So the financial system will adapt to the situation that is changing very fast.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of countries looking at their laws. I want to ask about the way that this is all being administered in Uruguay. Eloisa, take a look at this comment we got on Facebook. Bruno says, it's easy to get marijuana here, even if it's kind of light. It's there for us. And he sent us pictures of what the product actually looks like. So here you can see the plant that he bought, and this is what the packaging looks like. And then we got this tweet from Bryce. He said, pharmacy selling cannabis is preferred from a public health standpoint. It may not be sexy, but it's a safer way to sell psychoactives. Eloisa, can you tell me, why did Uruguay decide to sell this via pharmacies?
I think it might be a political issue. Actually, right now it's a problem because of the banking system, but it's also on the law. I don't think the law will have passed if we had made any other system. And a more, a system that promotes more consumption wouldn't have happened here in Uruguay, I would say. I would say that it's not as easy as it sounds to get cannabis here. You have to be Uruguayan, you have to be either born here or legally a resident, at least legally. I know what Raquel is going to say. At least in the legal system, it's not that easy.
So it's not as easy as it sounds. Hannah, can you tell us more about that? What does that registration process look like? Because you have some activists saying legalization, but only part way, Hannah.
Sure. So, I mean, I think what's really interesting about the Uruguayan model is they really adapted it to fit the national context, but also borrowed from some of the lessons and models from around the world. So it has 4 methods of access for marijuana: medical marijuana through the Ministry of Public Health, and then retail sales to Uruguayan adult residents in pharmacies, the Cannabis social club model, which is similar to that in Spain, and then domestic cultivation. So they really kind of did a very innovative approach to marijuana regulation. And I would say even the pharmacy model, it's very different to what we have in the US with our dispensaries. But even that, I think the framing of that was the idea that they do provide access to public health professionals when you are going in to buy a substance that could potentially be harmful. It's also, pharmacies are quite trusted in Uruguay. They already exist in the interior of the country, not just the capital. But I think what's important about Uruguay is that they have sort of built in some level of flexibility in their system. So when things like this come up, they should be able to shift, because this is new. It's new around the world, and part of it will be trial and error. And so I think there are some things that Uruguay started pretty slow with and wanted to have a very controlled and regulated system, and the user registry is one of those. We don't have that in the United States, but in Uruguay you do have to register with the government to access marijuana, and that puts some people off. But I think it's all under the umbrella of approaching this very cautiously and slowly, and then working from that.
Right, so we're getting in live
Yeah.
comments from YouTube. I just want to read a
Conversation.
comment that we're getting on YouTube. This is from Ben Harper fan. He says, I think the US can learn from Uruguay that the legal purchase, cultivation, and use of cannabis can be a viable business model and a source of revenue. But we also got a video comment, and Raquel, I want to get your thoughts on this. Listen to Milton Romani. He was the former president of Uruguay's National Drug Board. Take a listen.
A pesar de las dificultades, ya podemos decir algo del mercado regulado de cannabis en Uruguay. Hay más de 20.000 uruguayos y uruguayas que se han registrado, han mostrado la confianza en el Estado y en la ley y no compran en el narcotráfico. Como dijo el director nacional de policía, comisario general Mario Lallera, es una buena noticia que haya una cantidad tan importante de uruguayos que no cometen un ilícito, no van a un lugar inseguro y le están restando en estos momentos casi el 30% del mercado al narcotráfico, que es el objetivo central de este modelo.
So Raquel, you said at the top of this program that this is a matter of security for Uruguay. I know it's early days, but do you think that this marijuana legalization is going to effectively curb the black market in the country?
Yes, as it has happened in any country that has actually did something with the business of cannabis. Crime is related. Different kinds of crimes are related to drug dealing, drug buying, purchasing, whatever. So, if you reduce the amounts of illegal transactions, you also are reducing criminality related to that kind of business. But more interestingly, is all the other crimes that are a consequence of this, also are related to it's said that cannabis is the gateway to drugs. It's not true. What is gateway to drugs is the dealer. So if you reduce the people that is going to the black market to buy cannabis, you are reducing the amounts of people that is coming inside of a criminal scene. The criminal scene is violent, but also has some codes that have to are putting pressure in the people. It's already known that people that is buying at the black market is stressed because they are not criminals. But there is another consequence. When you go to buy at the black market, you access to other drugs that are more dangerous and probably are more related to crime, just like pasta base, or methamphetamines or heroin in your country.
Of course, is a form of... Go ahead, Raquel.
Smokable cocaine.
Right, exactly.
It's the smokable cocaine. So it's a very dangerous drug, and it's very short effect. So they need lots of money to not go down. No having a withdrawal
So Raquel,
syndrome. And this is more
sounds
related to criminality.
right.
So we are
and
going
what
to
you're saying, of
reduce it.
course, because you were part of this bid and this legalization, is the government's view on why this was necessary. But I want our audience to also take a look at this public service announcement. Now, this is from 2013, after cannabis was legalized. And while the government has said why this was needed, they also put out a little bit of a warning. Have a look.
Todo consumo de drogas tiene riesgos. Informarnos nos ayuda, conectarnos con nuestros hijos, mucho más. Junta Nacional de Drogas, Presidencia de la República.
So Eloisa, as you see there, they're giving a sort of warning on the dangers of marijuana use. But we also got this statement just into the stream from the ambassador, Ambassador Carlos Gianelli. He says, it is clear that the Uruguayan case is considered an example of good practices, safe and responsible, and that the Uruguayan government is intended to fully comply with Law 18761, passed in June 2011, that's a Uruguayan law, which regulated the sale of cannabis. So the government is convinced, Eloisa, but what does the public think? What's public opinion on this?
Well, the first thing, just a couple of days before the actual sale of marijuana through pharmacies, the government released a similar campaign that the one that you showed, alerting of the health issues that could be associated with cannabis. This law has been widely, the people are widely against it. The last surveys show that at least the majority, 50% or 60%, it depends on the survey, is against still marijuana. I wouldn't say so much against consumption, but the fact that the state is behind the distribution and the production of marijuana. But as Raquel said, I do also think that the government sees this as a public health issue. And the main thing here is going to be the first couple of data that we can see of what effects has the law actually had in consumption, in crime reduction. There is a lot of myths that are still very vividly living here in Uruguay. So just the thing that, to go to a pharmacy and see that someone who has a degree, who is, who has a job, who is suited up, is also buying cannabis. That is going to be a main thing towards changing this image, I would say.
So talking about public opinion in other countries as well, Eduardo, I want you to take a look at these things we just got. So we got this comment on YouTube from Jeremy. He says, please check out Seychelles' plight for legalization. We have a major drug problem, and that's heroin, and legalizing weed could really help us. What resources can I bring to the debate back home? But we're getting a lot of pushback. We got this tweet from Mikhail. He says, for public health, I think we should look at it for medical use, not for chilling out and relaxing at home. Eduardo, you're from the first country to legalize recreational marijuana use on a national scale. What do you hope other countries will learn from the example of Uruguay?
Well, the first lesson is that legalization and regulation by the state is much better than prohibition. We can now make campaigns saying what the risks are, what the real risks are, and not frighten people with disinformation. That is the usual thing in prohibited countries. This is just a plant. It's not a drug that comes out from a laboratory. And I agree with the comment about medicinal cannabis. I think that Uruguay needs to develop much faster medicinal cannabis, should encourage research. And I think that one of the aspects of medicinal cannabis that will be very important, as the person from Seychelles said, is that we are under an epidemic of opioids all around the world, and cannabis works much, much better is much less addictive and has almost no secondary effects. So it should be a natural substitute from opioids. So I think that the first lesson is legalization is better from a health point of view, from a security point of view, and also allows the development of scientifically checked medicinal cannabis. So it's just doing policy by checking the facts. The facts are prohibition has been a complete failure, and legalization in Uruguay in these 3 years is proving to be a much better solution. I think that you should come to Uruguay and see by yourself.
Eduardo, I
Yes.
hear you. So that raises this question. I pulled this up on my screen here. Dan, you are from Canada,
I am.
you know this well. Trudeau, your prime minister, unveiling a bill legalizing recreational marijuana in Canada, and that is set for next year.
Yes, and it's been a long time coming, and people aren't sure exactly how it's going to all unfold. So as you saw, there's a question of banks.
Hannah, on that topic, on that question of banks, very briefly, do you think we're going to see the same thing that we're seeing here in this Uruguayan case?
With the banks in Canada?
Right. And U.S. banks not wanting to do business with banks in Canada.
Right. Well, I think, there's a difference between Uruguay and Canada. As Eloisa pointed out, Uruguay is very reliant on transactions and accessing the international financial market through banks in the United States and the dollarization of Uruguay. I don't know that Canada has the exact same context and situation, but I'm also curious, and I don't know this, but I'm curious how Canada, that has had legal medical marijuana for many years, has been operating with regards to a transaction with United States banks, because it's also not legal on the federal level to have medical marijuana. That's still on the state level. But I think really, speaking from the United States, I think something really needs to be done on our side to prevent, our national legislation from preventing other countries going ahead with their sovereign decisions. And I think, it's quite ironic that the reasons that United States are giving to put a stop to this are fighting drug trafficking and fighting money laundering, which is exactly what Uruguay is trying to do by making a previously illicit market licit. So we're either going to have to work towards marijuana legalization on a federal level in the United States, hope for but unlikely guidance from the federal government for banks operating with Uruguay, or a bill in Congress that would also help United States marijuana businesses from not having to deal with cash.
You are listening to Hannah Hetzer. We also heard from Dr. Raquel Peirobe, Eduardo Blasina, and Eloisa Capuro. Thank you for joining us on this conversation. That's all the time we have for now. And as always, our conversation will continue online with Dan and our community at #AJStream. Thanks for watching.